We are delighted to introduce Garrett Graff, Director of Cyber Initiatives at Aspen Digital, for a conversation with Lisa Monaco, Deputy Attorney General at the U.S. Department of Justice. Please welcome Garrett and Lisa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us after the break. I'm Garrett Graff from the Aspen Institute. Christy Canagello, who is the senior official performing the duties of the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, was supposed to be joining us this afternoon.
We should say you were mandated to use that cumbersome title.
Yes. But unfortunately, she is sick today, and so I am pleased still to be joined by solo Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco.
Thanks for having me.
So, Lisa, I want to start off today talking about some of the news that is unfolding today from the Department of Justice about Flak's Typhoon. Director Ray mentioned it a little bit this morning, but I wonder if you could give us a little bit more detail about what has transpired and what action the Justice Department has taken.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Garrett, for doing this conversation. Thank you, Aspen Digital and Vivian and the whole team for putting this conversation together. I'm really glad you asked about this because it's another example of the Department of Justice working with the FBI, with the National Security Division, with all of our partners both here and abroad to take the fight to our cyber adversaries. And that's what we've done again today for the second time, I should say, Garrett, second time this year that we have taken action to disrupt a state-sponsored, in this case, a Chinese hacker group, state-sponsored hacker group that had established a wide-ranging global botnet. And the hacker group here we're calling Flak's Typhoon, has been labeled so by the security community. And what they did was operating through a company in Beijing, which was really just cover for this hacker group to launch this botnet that had infected devices, more than 200,000 devices globally, including more than half here in the United States. And we're talking consumer devices like cameras, like DVRs, and we're talking routers and targeting critical infrastructure, government entities, universities, you name it, all to conduct malicious cyber activity. And what we did in a joint sequenced operation, which I think is becoming a hallmark of the type of work that we are doing in the Justice Department, to really pivot to disruption, to prioritize disruption, to use every tool that we can to go after our adversaries, prevent, disrupt, and hold accountable. And importantly, to put victims first. And that's what you're seeing here again. Thank you very much. And you know, the point here is, you know, we're prosecutors, right? We're going to bring criminal cases when we can, but that's not the only tool in the toolbox. And where we can take action to prevent, to disrupt, to prevent the next victim, we're going to do so. And that's what we did here by using technical know-how, using legal authorities to remove that malware from those devices and disrupt and wipe out that botnet. I say second time in a year because this comes after earlier this year where we conducted another joint sequenced operation on Volt Typhoon, another PRC state-sponsored hacker group that in that case had infected routers, a lot of in-home routers, and that was really, the assessment in that case was really to lie in wait to potentially launch very disruptive and chaotic operations at a time and place of their choosing, potentially to respond to a conflict in Taiwan or some future time. So here again, the theme is disruption, prevention, putting victims at the center of our strategy, and that's what we've done again today.
Craig Newmark was talking earlier today about, you know, the need to sort of bring cybersecurity home to the average American. What does the average American care about a botnet that China has built that you guys have disrupted? Like, why should that matter to the average American?
Well, I'll say a few things in that regard, Garrett. One, it's your router, your in-home router, it's your camera, it's your DVR, well, maybe not your DVR, but that is potentially being infected. That's point one. Point two is, in the case of Volt Typhoon, we are talking about state-sponsored actor lying in wait in our critical infrastructure, in our own devices, to potentially launch a destructive attack, a disruptive attack at a time of geopolitical conflict. That has real potential impact on every American citizen. In the case of this most recent operation, Flax Typhoon, here again, our own personal devices, in many cases, being compromised by a nation-state actor and used as cover to conduct all sorts of malicious cyber activity, right? It could be exfiltrating confidential information. It could be to conduct other types of disruptive activity. So what that means for the average American is criminal activity, disruptive activity going on in their potentially in their devices, and it is part of a broader ecosystem that malicious cyber actors are using.
Let me switch and talk a little bit about election security for a little bit here.
Timely.
Yeah. You have been very outspoken on foreign threats sort of throughout this election season. You have lived in your career the arc of foreign threats to our election. You were at the FBI when China hacked the Obama campaign and the McCain campaign. You were at the White House as Homeland Security advisor when Russia attacked the 2016 election. How do you think about the threat landscape for the election this fall?
First, thank you for that trip down memory lane. So look, let me zoom out more broadly and say the threat environment, very broadly speaking, is today the most complex and I think aggressive that I've ever seen. And you pointed that I'm not new to this world. And why do I say that? We've got more diverse set of actors acting more aggressively, all fueled by technology, and in particular, of course, AI. When it comes to the election security space, and election security threat, I think we've got, again, a more diverse set of actors in play here. They are acting more aggressively. They are doing so in a much more polarized environment than we've ever seen before, and they're utilizing more and more disruptive technology to do all this. And when I think about the election security threats, we kind of put them in a few different buckets. I think if Christy Canagallo were here, she'd want to be talking about election infrastructure. We're going to talk, I'm sure, more about foreign malign influence. That's another, of course, category of threats that we are very concerned about. And then something that I think we all should be very concerned about is a semi-new entrant in the threat landscape, and that's the threat to election workers. These are physical threats of violence and intimidation that we have seen an unprecedented and really disturbing rise in threats to election workers, threats to public officials of all stripes, and that's something I see almost disturbingly on a daily basis. When I receive reports from the field, I get something called urgent reports almost every day. Those of you who are Justice Department veterans in the audience know what I'm speaking about. These are reports from the field, from U.S. attorneys' offices around the country, sending in urgent reports for my review, for the Attorney General's review. And what I'm seeing on a more and more frequent basis is those reports containing reports of threats of violence to public officials, to judges, to prosecutors, to law enforcement agents, and yes, to election workers. That could be state election officials. These are folks who are elected to do their job, all the way to election workers who are simply volunteers. Volunteers to help us go to vote, to exercise our most fundamental right, the right that, after all, protects all the other rights. So these threats to election workers are something that I think we need to be and have been very, very focused on when it comes to the impact on the potential conduct of the election, because it's intimidating election workers from simply doing their job, and that's unacceptable. So we're seeing, when it comes to tactics, everything from mis and disinformation about, for instance, hacking into voter registration databases. And shout out to CISA and the FBI, who last week issued a public service announcement about the potential for that type of disinformation to sow discord and a lack of confidence in the electoral process, to foreign malign influence campaigns, which I want to get to, I hope, next, to this threats of physical violence to election workers.
We've also seen outright political violence in this cycle, and I wonder if you could talk about the Justice Department's reaction to the seeming attempted assassination attempt over the weekend.
Absolutely. I mean, I've just talked about the rise in threats to public officials, and there's no more stark and disturbing example of that than the attempted assassination against the former president back in July, and now the apparent attempted assassination again just over the weekend in Florida. That investigation is very much ongoing, but let me say this very, very clearly. First of all, thank God that the former president is safe, and that there is absolutely no place in this country for political violence. Not in July, not last weekend, not now, not ever. It's absolutely unacceptable. And what we are doing is everything we possibly can, both to address the broader challenge of threats to public officials, and then with respect to this investigation, very much ongoing. We are in the very beginning days, only a few days into this investigation. The full force and resources of the Department of Justice are working on this investigation. The FBI leading this investigation, very heavily engaged across a whole set of different resources. Our prosecutors engaged, and we will spare no resource to get to the bottom of what happened.
Coming back to talk about the foreign threat landscape, we have seen sort of a host of actions by a wide variety of adversaries over the course of the year. China with the Spamouflage network. Last month, the FBI said, along with the rest of the intelligence community, in a joint advisory that it attributed Iran as the perpetrator of an attack on the former president's campaign. And then just yesterday, Microsoft came out with a report saying that it's seeing Russia pivot its influence operations against the Harris campaign. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the information operations side and sort of what you're seeing and how you're trying to combat that.
Sure. So a few things, really. I mean, you mentioned the history of foreign malign influence operations from China in 2008 to Russia in 2016 to today, and obviously intervening actions in 2020 as well with Iran. As I said at the outset, what we are seeing is a more aggressive and diverse landscape than ever before, fueled by technology and having a lot to work with when it comes to feeding off our own internal divisions. Now, what we are seeing in particular is, and I will call out a number of nation-state adversaries here, but starting with Russia and Iran, both accelerating their efforts to influence the presidential campaigns. And we are seeing all of the major actors in this space, Russia, Iran, China, using AI to fuel their foreign influence campaigns covertly and online. Just take a few examples, Garrett. Last week, we announced the actions that we have taken to expose, in particular, two campaigns directed by Russia, foreign malign influence online campaigns. In the first instance, what we did is expose a Russian state media outlet, RT, that has been funneling millions of dollars into and through shell entities to a U.S. company to co-opt unwitting American commentators to push out Russia-aligned and pro-Russia propaganda, all in an effort to sow discord, to feed off our internal divisions, and also in this election cycle to undermine our support for Ukraine. So we've charged two Russia-based executives of the RT state media outlet with a conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act and other charges. Then we also exposed a Putin-directed campaign to use a proxy company, Orwellianly named the Social Design Agency. This is a proxy company directed from the Kremlin to push out AI-generated content through fake websites, masquerading and mimicking legitimate news sites, but nevertheless fake, pushing out AI-generated content, again, designed to sow discord, to feed off internal divisions, and in the case of what we've shown in the Social Design Agency context, to really target specific blocks of voters, specific voter demographics, with pro-Russia narratives. And in that instance, this is another example, Garrett, where we didn't bring criminal charges. What we did is disrupt the internet domains, more than 30 of them, that were being used by this Russian proxy company to push these narratives out. Rendered them inoperable using lawful process, and disrupted and exposed this activity. And I have to shout out to the DNI here for, this is a real change from the last couple of years, being very transparent, very clear about what we are seeing from malicious actors and hostile nation states in this space. And you already mentioned Iran, but there too, they are accelerating their activity when it comes to foreign malign influence. I said this back in August, but it's very clear they are trying to influence the presidential campaign. They are pushing out false personas, fake personas, pushing out propaganda, and using, frankly, the Gaza conflict as almost kerosene to stoke divisions, and in some case to promote protest activity. And of course, you referenced the exposure that the FBI and the IC did on the campaign by Iranian malicious cyber actors to conduct this hack and leak operation on the former president's campaign. So let me be very, very clear. We are not underestimating the lengths to which Iran will go to influence this campaign.
Let me ask one more question on the election and then pull back and look a little bit more broadly. How prepared is the Department of Justice for domestic political violence heading into this election? You are still quite consumed in the Department of Justice with the prosecutions stemming from the last election on January 6th, and I wonder sort of how you're thinking about heading into this period after the election.
Well, look, any national security and law enforcement professional is going to tell you, or should be telling you, of our profound concern about the danger posed and the risk from lone actors, small groups who are radicalized to violence from a host of grievances. Here, the intelligence community and the Justice Department and others have been very clear about our concerns when it comes to domestic violent extremists, and in particular, the most lethal form here, racially motivated violent extremists. And unfortunately, I have a very good example of just this type of activity. Last week, when we brought charges against two leaders of the Terrorgram Collective. I say Terrorgram Collective. This is a transnational criminal group that's been using the Telegram platform to promote and advance a heinous white supremacist ideology, to provide direction and guidance on conducting terrorist attacks on critical infrastructure, to advance guidance on hate crimes and assassination attempts of government officials. So that's the threat that we are dealing with, that we are exceptionally focused on. Here again, no place for political violence, not in the guise of the Terrorgram Collective, not in the form of attacks on the former president, which after all is an attack on our democracy. Absolutely no tolerance, and we've been showing time and again that we will expose, investigate, and hold to account those perpetrators.
I want to step back now and look a little bit more broadly at the legacy of the Biden administration. And of course, you have not made any comments about when or you might step down from this position, but there is a presidential transition taking place one way or another come January at this point. And I wonder if you could talk about how you see and what you want the legacy of the Biden years to be in cybersecurity. When people look back at this presidency, what are you proud of and what do you feel has been accomplished in cyber?
Look, I think there's a lot to be proud of. I've talked about the pivot that the Justice Department has made to focus on prevention, disruption, and putting victims at the center of our strategy. And you've seen us do that time again, from getting back and taking back of the Colonial Pipeline ransomware payments to the efforts we have made to go after the entire ransomware ecosystem, to the efforts we're making on state-sponsored malicious cyber activity. When it comes to the broader administration's approach on cybersecurity, I think lots of people who can be pointed to for great work on that front in the White House and the National Cyber Director Office to the IC. But I think a few things that you can point to here. One is this administration has put cybersecurity at the center of and has seen it consistent with and commensurate with national security and economic security. It is placed as a measure of cybersecurity, how quickly can we respond to an attack on critical infrastructure. It is no longer simply about, and I don't mean to minimize the importance of this, but it's not only about patching and making sure that standards are being applied, but how resilient are we when it comes to attacks on critical infrastructure? And there has been tremendous good work on getting those sectors to really step up, from the transportation sector to energy to the water sector, and a real focus on putting in place these minimum cybersecurity standards so that we can be more resilient. And the work that has been done to push back on nation states and cyber and ransomware actors in particular, I think is work that we should all be very proud of.
And again, without presuming that there is a leadership transition at the Justice Department impending.
You really want to get me on that beach, which I am very happy to go to.
As you think about this presidential transition, you have sort of previously talked about sort of the way that counterterrorism was really a big part for the first time of the transition from the Clinton years to the Bush years, that it was counterterrorism and cyber from Bush to Obama, and cyber, counterterrorism, and bio from Obama to Trump. As you think about the threat landscape you are handing off to a new presidential administration in January, what is going to be the message that you are sending to the next administration?
You're really determined to make me relive the greatest hits here. Look, it's true. I have been president and involved in almost all of these, I think all of these transitions. I was the chief of staff to Director Mueller during the Bush to Obama transition. And then in the White House, as you said, in the Obama to Trump. And then in the Trump to Biden transition, I actually served after the horrible attack on January 6th. President-elect Biden asked me to serve as the Homeland Security Advisor to the inauguration because of the threat environment that we were in. As I think about this next transition, obviously we are focused on the terrorism threat, international terrorism, of course, and domestic terrorism, the cyber threat, emerging infectious diseases, all of which whoever the next team is will need to be prepared to deal with. But when I think about the next iteration here, I do think about the hostile nation states that we are having to deal with now in their efforts to project power at home and abroad across a host of vectors, whether it's cyber, whether it's proxies perpetrating terrorist acts, whether it's efforts to siphon off our most sophisticated technology to advance their aims, their interests that are not in alignment with our own, all of which being fueled by technology like AI. That, I think, is the very dominant threat landscape and a very dynamic threat landscape that we all will need to be prepared for in the future.
Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.